Hello and welcome to India's World. Over the past 2 years, global crude oil prices have been in free fall and no one seems to know what the rock bottom will be. In June 2014, oil was $110 a barrel of Brent crude. By early 2015, that had plunged to $60 per barrel. Today, it costs just about $30 or less to buy a barrel of oil, a level not seen since 2004. By all accounts, this is a staggering decline. Since mid-2014, the world has been producing far more oil than anyone needs. Supply remains much higher than demand, so prices have crashed. With Iranian oil coming into the market and America continuing to produce a significant amount of oil through fracking of shale, prices are expected to plummet to the $20 to $30 per barrel range. The price of oil has geopolitical consequences quite apart from the rising or falling cost of energy. To discuss the impact of declining oil prices, we have with us a distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Dr. Nitin Desai, an eminent economist. He was Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. He was also Under Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs of the United Nations. We have with us Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty. He was India's ambassador to Philippines, Thailand, and High Commissioner to Bangladesh. He has served in Indian missions in London, Cairo, Tel Aviv, and most importantly for us, in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. We have with us Professor Manoj Pant, a well-known economist. He's a professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University's Center for International Trade and Development. I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Dr. Desai, let me begin with you. What were the reasons for oil price rising between 2010 to 2014 and then falling so precipitously from mid-2014?
I think basically oil prices for the past 40 years have essentially moved in depending on what Saudi Arabia decides to do. They are the swing producer. They can afford to raise production and they can afford to reduce production because their oil is very low cost. Even at $30, they make money. Very few other producers do that. And it has been that way. The question we should ask is, why did the Saudis want to reduce prices now? Well, the answer given by most people is shale oil. They want to price out shale oil because they're concerned about the withdrawal of the United States from the Middle Eastern oil market. This is one big difference geopolitically. The fact that the U.S. dependence on the Middle East oil sources came down so dramatically. So my explanation is simply this, that this is a play by the Saudis.
Pinak, you've been in Saudi Arabia. Now, when there was an oversupply in the market, I understand that they wanted to chase the American North Dakota and Texas frackers out of the market. But equally, the Saudi budget is pegged on oil price being $100 a barrel. So if it fell much below that, it's fallen to less than one-third of that. Why haven't they cut production?
Well, you're absolutely right. Saudi finances have taken a hit. But don't forget, they have almost $1 trillion in reserves. Yeah. And they are dipping into those reserves for some time. Now, whether that will carry on for some time till they exhaust the reserves and then they start becoming a swing producer again and they cut back and allow the prices to rise. But why are they doing it? I think that's geopolitics, as Dr. Desai mentioned. They are worried that the Americans are no longer interested in maintaining the Saudi sort of posture or the backing that they got from the Americans because of oil. Americans are now self-sufficient in oil. The other, of course, is that they want to maintain their market share. So that any cutting back in production would mean that everybody else, since there is a glut, everybody else will jump into that thing. And don't forget, Iran is coming back into the market, which will produce even more glut. So those are the reasons why the oil prices have gone down and why the Saudis are desperately trying to see how best they can navigate this situation.
Professor Pant, maintaining market share may be one goal, but didn't the Saudis have another goal, which was basically to punish Iran and Russia for their involvement in Saudi Arabia? Because both are huge oil producers, and if oil prices go down, their economies get hit, perhaps more than Saudi Arabia's.
I don't think so. I think we are forgetting the economics of the oil market, independent of the politics. Politics can't drive economics all the time. Let me tell you why. We've looked at the supply side issues. Remember one thing, I don't think they calculated that this fall would take place. First of all, the production part is correct. From what I'm aware, the OPEC agreed on roughly about 30 million as the target. They're producing roughly about 32 point something now. Now that's a problem because oil you can't store, and there's a knife edge issue. Slight difference in supply demand and shoots up one way or the other. But there's the other issue. They never calculated that the world market would crash. There's also the demand side issues. The world economy is also gone for a 6. Exports are close to 0. Very few economies are growing. Very few. World growth is coming down to, I would say, heading towards 0% growth rate. So they're forgetting the demand side. They only looked at the same calculation we talked about, supply side, didn't bring this into question. I think they will do correctives, because I don't think they can afford it to go down to, barring Saudi Arabia, as Nitin's right. I heard from one of them was they can go down to $10 a barrel, because they're such all old fields that doesn't cost them very much. But I don't think it's in their interest. I don't know whether they're willing to sacrifice each other just to either Saudis bring Iranians down or the Iranians bring Saudi Arabia. So I think we are forgetting the demand side. I think this oil price is not only a supply issue, it's also reflecting what's happening in the world market.
On the demand side, the slowdown of the Chinese economy in the last 2 years.
And more generally, the slow growth.
And also the recent precipitous decline is, they say, because of a mild winter in Europe.
Right. Yeah.
Would you like to say something on the demand
Well, I
side?
think that sort of demand thing, mild winter, bad winter stuff, are temporary things which will go up and down this way. The Chinese the slowdown is significant, not just because of the fact of China's demand, but the role that China plays in determining growth in other places. 25% of global growth over the past decade, you can say, was due to Chinese growth. Now, that slowdown has a huge impact on all commodity markets, and oil is not exempt from that. Why are you talking of oil? Look at what's happening to other. I think the Economist Commodity Index is at one of its lowest levels in 2 decades.
Pinak, I mean, going back to the supply side, okay, there may be some correction by Saudi Arabia, but why would they make any correction when Iraq has doubled its production in 2014, and Iran is expected to bring upwards of 60,000 barrels a day into the market?
Let me first get into that the issue of the demand side, where clearly you have seen a shift into renewables and non-fossil fuels also. There's the climate change thing, which is spurring more research, etc., and all that. So there the demand side is also relevant as far as supply side is concerned. Now demand has sort of fallen and supply hasn't really fallen. So it's the standard, demand supply. Now why is Saudi Arabia behaving the way it is? I believe it is related to geopolitics of the situation as we have, of the region, as we have earlier mentioned. Iran is their biggest bugbear, and how to deal with Iran is something. There are, of course, a lot of conspiracy theories as to why the Saudis are doing this. They want somehow to suck America back into the equation so that they can deal with Iran.
Okay. All right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this discussion in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the impact of declining oil prices geopolitically. Manoj, who benefits from the oil price decline? What would be the impact on large oil importing economies who are saving so much on foreign exchange?
Sure. Look at it from the, again, from the income of countries' point of view. Barring the OPEC producers, even the US economy is not overly dependent on import of oil. They don't import. They have their own underground reserves. Now, the Middle East is the biggest loser. But the Middle East is not the driver of world growth for quite some time now. I think most emerging markets do gain if the oil price reduction remains. Now, where it goes, to what point it goes, I don't think it will go down too far.
Haven't they saved substantially already in the last 1.5 years?
Sure, but they are saving in a time when the world economy is in doldrums, right? If you save and you have money, you have to buy it. Again, I think Nitin or you mentioned briefly about China. That is the problem. Because China is not a very large part of world demand, about 10%, but it's dramatically declining. I mean, I think the numbers are not showing what's actually happening in China if you look at the debt figures, which I could get into later. But as I said again, if no one in the world is growing, then what is going to lead to an increase in price of oil? If you reduce the price further, there will be further economy measures. Fracking will become even more important. So I don't think that anyone barring the Middle East and anyone else loses from the oil pricing. After all, think of oil as an input. It's not a final good, right? Yep. Input prices fall, production should gain. Only thing is, production gain does what with it? Produce more and sell to whom? That's the problem.
Yeah.
There's
Okay,
one
Nitin.
interesting argument which I've heard, which is now that there's all this talk of leaving 50% of crude oil reserves in the ground, and 80% of coal. So jaldi se produce karo, cash it while you can, because after some time you will not be able to cash it.
But a country like India,
I don't
which
think that's a
is
very serious argument. I don't think that's yet a calculation.
okay, but as a country like India, which has saved so much on foreign exchange, how do we sustain these gains?
I think you can sustain the gains essentially by what you do. It gives you fiscal room.
Yeah.
I would, if I you ask me one simple thing, use that money to boost public investment in infrastructure. We desperately need it if we want to kickstart growth in this country. So that, the answer is very clear. You can do the same. But there's one point here which we should keep in mind. The fact that the world financial system has been heavily petrodollar dependent. And now we will see it in terms of stuff. The money is coming in from sovereign, the Middle East sovereign wealth funds will come down. I'm told that there's already some cashing in going in from there, from these parts. So it's not. It's a mixed thing. That to the extent to which you want a booming stock market, you will face some problems because of the withdrawal of these guys from the market.
Okay. Pinak, why isn't OPEC trying to stabilize the markets by cutting oil production to prevent oversupply? Because there are countries like Iran, Venezuela, Ecuador, Algeria. They've been pressing OPEC to cut supply, but OPEC doesn't listen to them. OPEC listens to Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, to UAE. Why is that?
You see, OPEC cannot do much unless Saudi Arabia agrees to actually participate and collaborate. And countries like Iran, Iraq, and Iran now, they have the desperate need to raise revenues because they've been under sanctions. Iraq has had problems, so they need the money. So these are oil-dependent economies. Saudi Arabia at least has a cushion, a large cushion, so they can play this out for some time, but not for too long, I think. So I think OPEC is basically failed to have a consensus because Saudi Arabia refuses to have, to bring down production. So that is why OPEC has not succeeded, although at one time they had succeeded in cartelizing and all that. But today I don't see the OPEC succeeding in getting its act together.
Manoj, now correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I can see three scenarios in which oil prices can go up again. One, a war in the Middle East between one or more of the oil-producing countries. Two, Saudi Arabia deciding to cut production. And third, a surge in demand. Now, which of these three is a likely scenario in the short and medium run?
Third is out. Nothing is going to happen to world demand for the next couple of years. There's no question of it. Now you come to the second issue and the first issue. I believe that the most sensible thing, and this simple economics, is the cut in the production. I'll tell you why. You see, demand for oil in the short run is extremely inelastic. You can't suddenly increase supply, you can't suddenly decrease. So if the prices go down, the revenue will also go down. So they will soon understand that geopolitics, which you rightly say, is not a great game if it's mutually self-destructive. And I think that there are, it's not only the Saudi prince and the president of the Iranian ruler who decide what to do. There are a whole lot of producing companies who will tell them, look, let's have some sense in the market. I don't think oil will go very much further down. I do believe it will inch back. It will stay in the 30 to 40 range, but I think that's pure economics. The geopolitics will continue. The last one, the war, I don't think so. There's one guy fighting a war with all of them, the ISIS. So that question is, is Iran a worse enemy of mine or is the ISIS a worse enemy? Now, there'll be people who will argue politically that ISIS is backed by the Saudis because of the Sunni link. But the radicals among the Sunnis are the ISIS. Now, the question is, they could be like our own Bhindranwale. One day they may turn on Saudi Arabia themselves.
Okay, but Pinak, you wanted to say something on this?
No, I just want to say that there is huge speculation that the only way oil prices head upwards is if there is a war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Now, obviously, the probability is very low. But I think the oil market is already speculating on that, and I hope it never happen. But the other point really is that even if demand picks up of oil, the amount of investments made into non-fossil renewables today is quite huge. Yes. And I think that itself is going to have an impact. That consumptions, will probably plateau out in terms of fossil fuels. And that itself will reduce demand or stagnate demand.
No, I think the only way today the problem is that you cannot get a production cut unless you get an agreement in OPEC. The Saudis are not going to say we'll cut production and let Iran earn more. They will never agree.
They will never.
It'll have to be an OPEC agreement. But how? When two of them are busy trying to destroy each other, and two of the key members are busy, how can OPEC agree?
Nitin,
I don't see how a production cut can come now.
Okay, quickly.
Nitin, I'm simply saying that I agree with you. The geopolitics of all wars in Middle East have been oil related, right? Starting from the Iraq intervention. But I'm saying geopolitics is never mutually self-destructive. And given the strong dependence, even Iran, right? They need the oil revenues tremendously after the sanctions. It makes no sense. If they had something else to export, is what will Saudis do? If their oil revenues go down to 1/10, there'll be a political revolt within the country.
Absolutely.
I don't
We'll
think
discuss
that's
that.
true.
We'll discuss that in a bit. But we need to take a break again at this point. We'll be back again shortly. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the geopolitical impact of declining oil prices. Pinak, given the centrality of oil and oil revenues in the global power equation, how would falling oil prices translate into a change in international political order? Do you already see petroleum producing states losing prominence and clout?
Well, it's bound to happen. I mean, once the world moves away from fossil fuels and mainly oil, but gas is of course a preferred thing, but they also have gas. So in my view, the decline, as it were, of their importance in the global order is perhaps a little far-fetched at this stage, because we are going to be dependent on gas for a very long time as well.
But Saudi Arabia and Russia, aren't they losing clout already?
They are losing money. And clout, in that sense, yes, to some extent, if money buys a lot of clout, then they are losing that as well. But I believe that both think that the oil prices will bounce back somehow. And that is why they are trying to stretch this out, and depending on their reserves and adjusting to this current phase. Hopefully the economies will pick up, demand will pick up, and I think that is the expectation in the long run.
Well, we'll live on hope. But
In the case of Russia, a lot of its income is from gas. Both the stuff is supplied to Europe through Gazprom, as well as the new deals which they've signed with China. And that is a relatively stable, safe one. Of course, gas prices are also coming down, but not that dramatically. They're not collapsed because of the sheer cost of transporting and reconstituting in LNG terminals. So I'm not sure that the economic impact on other countries is going to be so catastrophic. And frankly,
But let me argue that it is going to be catastrophic. So let me go to Manoj. That by the end of this year, Saudi Arabia's budget will reach at 20%. A deficit will be 20% of GDP. 20% deficit, and this has prompted IMF to say that if the Saudis could exhaust all their reserves within 5 years if they don't change their policies.
Correct.
Riyadh has already responded by spending cuts, by taking away energy subsidies, by telling government departments not to invest in infrastructure, not to buy new cars and new furniture. Now, if this continues, what kind of internal political dynamic could declining oil politics lead to in the kingdom?
See, if I can bring in, just peripherally, if I can bring in China. See, the politics, internal politics of China, the Middle East country is the same. China depends on the economics dominancy, otherwise they're in trouble internally. Same thing with the Middle East countries. If Saudi Arabia is not able to keep away increasing taxes, even countries like Dubai, let me mention, they don't raise income taxes yet, but that's why people work there, but they've started raising user charges. Now you have higher user charge for that higher. Very soon you see Saudi doing the same thing. Now once their economics for the locals is not as rosy as it was, I think they're in serious trouble. And don't forget the one, what you might call nigger in the woodpile, which is the ISIS, which is hoping that the exact... See, they're the only ones who have no interest in economics. They don't care if everyone self-destructs as long as their rosy picture
But that's
remains.
also not true. They were selling stolen oil through
Yes.
Turkey. So
No,
they,
but
they have economic
but remember,
They
their
need the money after all.
No, but their falling capacity is far more than these guys.
Okay. Let's take the case of Russia. Okay. Oil reserves constitute, oil revenues constitute, I beg your pardon, 50% of the Russian budget. And their budget is pegged at assuming an oil price of $50 a barrel. Now it is less than half of that, or nearly half of that. Now, how will this precipitous decline in oil revenues, I don't know how precipitous it is, impact Russia domestically in the years to come and its ability to contain internal dissent?
Well, I think first thing there, some tightening of belt is going on everywhere. I think, and all the countries where oil revenues constitute a major chunk of their income, their revenue income. And as for Russia, I think there's the other factor is that generally a strong dollar has kept the local, the ruble expenditure within kind of manageable limits. So I think they are still managing, but the gas part, as was mentioned, is going to bring in a lot more revenue. This huge deal with China, for example, and Gazprom, and again building other gas streams into Europe again. I think that will keep Russia more or less reasonably not comfortable, but at least they won't go down the tube. I think that those are the two things that will keep them, afloat.
But there is this conspiracy theory that Putin has gone into Syria to take attention away from the economic decline within.
I don't know.
And next year onwards, the Russian economy is going to contract. It's not going to grow.
Problem, but,
That's possible. And but I don't think the Syria bit, I doubt if that's a serious argument. Because I don't think it plays such a huge role domestically in the Soviet. He can't go to the Russian people and say, oh, because we are fighting in Syria, you had to raise taxes on it. Will not
I
work.
don't think so.
In South Asia, we do it all the time, but let's hope the Russians
Well,
don't do it. We go to elections after wars, contrived or otherwise.
But then I
Then
think
then he has to win first. Huh?
But I think I agree with the other two here, Bharat, panelists, because their involvement in Syria is more a question of being involved in the Middle East somewhere.
It's a conspiracy theory, so I rejected it in a
Right,
sense.
right.
It's a US issue, and it's a question of when do they agree or when the US agree on what happened to Assad. That's really what it's all about. I don't think there's
Professor Desai, if we leave out China and India and some countries like China and India where automobile demand is still growing, the world over, there are climate change concerns, lifestyle changes, consequent change in energy mix and how we commute, how we use energy. So do you think a time will come soon when the oil demand will peak and then start declining, which is what Pinak was hinting at? But could this happen in the next decade or would it take longer?
I would say it's not going to happen before 2030 or so. If you look at what the countries have projected, you still have a rising oil demand from the growing countries, emerging countries and so on. Yes, it's possible the pressures will increase as we go down the line. The present 2030 forecast will have to come down, but I don't think it's going to do that. The real challenge is beyond that, and that is because you will need something for mobility. And it's very interesting that a lot of the big oil producers are also investing heavily in renewables. Saudi Arabia in solar, making major investments in solar. So they are quite aware of the way the world is likely to evolve, but I think that is not now. It's
Pinak, same question to you.
Well, I think renewables, as Dr. Desai just said, that they are the fossil fuel producers are themselves obviously investing in renewables, and that itself shows
But
that
they haven't been major technological breakthroughs. Take solar cells, photovoltaic cells.
Yeah.
What is the efficiency? Very low. No major breakthrough. Wind power, no major breakthrough. So you have investments, but by the time the results come,
one
it may be a long
impact of
time.
low oil prices, as I think I said it before, is that the attractiveness of investing in solar cell technology, for example, and to improve the efficiency, it detracts from it in the sense that, okay, we have this oil, so why not use it? We'll think about solar cell technology and how to improve efficiency. Before that needs investments, more research, etc.
Manoj, will oil demand peak and then start declining in the next 10 years?
I don't think it will change very much from what it is now. And I'll tell you why. Apart from the economics, There's another factor you're forgetting, that very soon the next world mandatory agreement will take place apart from WTO, and that's the climate change. That's on. See, the Americans have started talking about it. The Europeans have implemented environment concerns for a very long time. So they're never going to raise their demand for fossil fuel. That systems do not allow this. If the climate change thing comes in and the Americans get into it, then you will see a huge substitution away from. I don't think they're going to go any further than what they are around.
Okay. We've really run out of time, so I'd like to thank all of you, Professor Manoj, Pant, Ambassador Pinak, Ranjan, Chakravarty, Dr. Nitin Desai, for coming here and participating in this discussion. We could go on, but unfortunately, we have a time limit. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.